I started to work with Lelia Mordoch in her Miami gallery earlier in 2017. And she had seen one of my works in the Art Basel Miami in December, and she invited me there to do a light-tech sculpture, one similar to this, but a much bigger one. And then when I was in Miami, she says, why don't you make an exhibition in Paris? Well, I live in Paris, so it's perfect. This is her space in Paris, which she's had for 30 years. And she has actually produced a book for me, and the book is with a text of Kristin Bussy-Glucksmann, and I also written a lot of text myself, and there's a lot of photos inside that shows basically the same thing we're trying to show in the exhibition, what I have done with new media art and technology and the kind of strategies I use in my work with art, sculpture and painting as animated forms, but also the smart sculptures and new technology integrated in the materials that I use. So you see here, the light-tech sculpture is a kind of a projector. I like the fact that I'm using a lot of junk, or I would say like old cords and connectors and all of that. But also there's quite a lot of new pieces that are very significant in the terms of my previous works. This is a little part from one of the robot sculptures that I created in 2015. And as you can see, I'm very attached to textile and textile tradition, because I worked with that for almost 40 years, so it's a little part of that in the sculpture. I work with these cutouts, which are like painted with graffiti things in order to create these kind of surfaces. So I'm combining yet another technique. I also have these things that I developed for the wands. It's like a kind of a texture made out of zip tags that you can find anywhere, but I've used it as an aesthetic material. And basically also the sculpture is sewn together with zip tags. So it's not so much like I'm welding sculptures, I'm actually sewing sculptures together. I try to create these little places that you look inside the sculpture. Everywhere you look, there's like a little story. You could call it a kind of Wunderkammer. You know, like when people look in little boxes and then see something. So everywhere you go around, you can experience something new. For instance, there is a projector here, and I have projected it here, but also I intervened with a kind of reflective glass, and now you can see the shadow of that and the reflection over there. So it creates a little theater, like a visual theater. And I also integrated one of the stencils that I've been using for my Venus paintings. Lately I started to paint a lot again, which is great. And so I use that as a projection, and you can see on the wall, you kind of see the Venus outline here being projected as a shadow against the wall here. And so it's all these little things that create a kind of architecture or narrative within the space. I'm very happy to show these wands in Lelia's gallery. You know, they've been traveling a lot. They've been in Paris and Oslo, and they've been in Qatar, Doha with New York Times, and back again to Norway, and here they're back again to Paris. So these sculptures, they travel probably as much as I do. You know, so it's nice to have them here. They're still first-generation smart sculptures. And they introduce themselves with their names, biomyth and transhuman. Here is, I have some videos, and I have what I call the metamorphosis of the virtual. There's a chapter dedicated to that in this book, and why I was thinking about sculpture and painting as animated forms, and what are the implications in art or in the history of art of that, which is something that is very interesting for me. here we have another light hack sculpture. This is one of the first ones I did actually in 2016 when I started to experiment with it. And that's also where I took the title Light Hack, because you know today is like a big thing about hacking. So after I had made these wands, which are, you know, they're made with a lot of heavy technology and programming and research and so on, I started to find things in the supermarket that was, you know, cost a few dollars or a few euros, that was sort of like ready-made. And I said, why do I have to develop everything if I can find it cheap in the store? So I started to change my perspective. I use the same materials, but as you see, I have this toy in here that actually used to be my daughter's toy, but she was kind of growing up and she was trying to say like she didn't want it anymore. And then as I'm very interested in screens, I started like say, okay, maybe I can use it in my light hack sculpture. And I find it very humorous because it's of course New York, and the photo is so old. So you see the World Trade Centers are still there. And so it gives a kind of reference, and I call the whole sculpture for Wonderland. And it's quite one of my favorite pieces. Also, as a projector, you see that it gives a kind of shadow around, it gives color around. And I really like to work with color. It's not only that I work with lights, but I also work with the colors. The last series that I have, and I didn't speak so much about, is the Colosse Island series. And this actually started as a video. I started to, for Centre Pompidou in 2014, I started to make a kind of a cube that would follow a trail. The trail I made with my hand in free space, you know, in 3D space like this. And then after, with the programmer Jan Min, we made the cubes go in and follow the trail around as a kind of animation. And I filmed that, and then I started to put more and more and more of them in the surfaces, and then I built it up as big canvases, basically. So the Cubiber, I actually started in 3D, and then I took it into 2D and started to create paintings out of that. And then after that, I took, from the painting, I decided to go into 3D again. I started to push and pull the new surfaces into another version. And I actually made a video, which I presented in the show Art Avatar. And then I went back into 2D again. This is the result of the exchange. First in 3D, 2D, 3D, and back to 2D. And also what is special is that I cut out the form. So when you walk on the side of this, you kind of get the idea that it's three-dimensional. But it's actually flat, but I play with this idea of three-dimensionality. You have one here too, where you can see it becomes like an optical illusion, the way it sort of like folds out into space. And Colosse Island is a little bit about our time as well, because you know we have the ability today to create biomass. We have the ability to combine machines and humans and so cyborgs, and we also are exploring in outer space. We are building things everywhere. You know, everything is a kind of a man-made approach, but at the same time, there's probably some kind of fractal creativity that is connected to nature on a deep level, and that's where Colosse Island comes in and talks about that connection that is kind of artificial, kind of synthetic, but actually belongs to nature as we know it, as we are nature. And well, you have also these two pieces here that you can see that is among the same title. And one of them I called actually the alchemist. And this alchemist is kind of positive as an artist, because you know what artists do is that we take something that it's normal. We take a piece of paper and we take a piece of color, and then we take some other stuff and we put it together, and all of a sudden it becomes something. And this is a kind of a transformation of creation that alchemists were always interested in. How could they create gold, for instance, as it's central in the civilization. And so I'm still interested in that creative process, because we have the power to create, and we can create basically anything we want, and the question comes in humanity is about our value system. What is it that we want to create, and what are we using our energy and our power of creation for? So that becomes the underlying question. To say something about transforming Venus is that as I travel around the world, I know that I'm from Norway, and in Norway we have a lot of powerful women. We have the Prime Minister, we have the Minister of Culture. I'm grown up with women in power from I was a kid, and when I travel around the world, I see that there's a lot of different positions for women around in different societies. But with the new technology, I wanted to say about the cloning that was possible from 2003, the ability to rent the womb or order seed on the internet and so on. All of those things that I also referred to in Kolas Island, it's very, very new for humankind to be able to do this thing concerning the procreation. And the Venus, so you see over here, the Venus is one of the oldest artifacts in Europe, 30,000 years old, the first Venus. And I think that the first Venus, they only speculate. It's connected to procreation or the ability for the tribe to survive. And so today we are at another step. Art is still at the center of this survival. It's still at the center of the tribe's ability to procreate, to survive, to go into the future. But we are drastically in a different place. And it changes everything between men and women. It changes the potential for women too, because they have much more freedom, much more technology, much more things that help them to realize their own powers. And that's very, very interesting. So for the last 10, 15 years, I worked a lot with sculpture and painting as animated forms. And basically to do that, I work in technology software, where I shape and I create forms that I previously been showing on videos and big installations, and also as photo images. The last years, I also been working with a kind of augmented reality, especially in the project Art Avatar, where you can see the shape and play with it and so on. In this exhibition, for the first time, I actually have a production in virtual reality with Venus. The Venus is the theme of the show. And it was produced by an artist friend, Juan de Parc, who did this in order to help me to get into this medium. And when I go in here, just like in the movies, I have the credits here, and I have all the titles and so on. The first sequence here is one of the Venuses, and it's called Transforming Venus, like the exhibition. And when I walk around here, I'm like in a whole new space. I'm no longer in the gallery. I see a gigantic Venus in front of me, covered in some of the prints that I have in the paintings around here, and a lot of other Venuses flying around in space. They are red and with like a sky blue background. And to create an interface, because it's very much like theater, we can walk around the space, we can look, and then there is a kind of a infinity sign which tells us about the loop. And then here I am in a new situation. This one is called Dual Citizen Venus. And I created one Venus dominantly white and the other one dominantly black. And they have all these smaller Venuses that are, she's giving birth to all these smaller Venuses, and they fly around, and it's very, very graphic with the white and the black. It's very beautiful and very interesting to explore in this way. You can go very, very close up to the sculpture. You can stand very close and look at the details, and you can move around. You can look up and down. There's things below me, maybe like 3 or 4 meters, and there's things above me also 3 or 4 meters. So this one was the second one, and now I have to see where is my loop. I think it's over here, so that I can, okay, so here I'm in the next sequence. The third one is called the Army of Venus. And it's a very monolithic sculpture, gold Venus, and out of her Venus comes a kind of a spiraling out, many rows of smaller Venuses that create a kind of a sculptural lateral garden as I move around. And the last one over here is, let's see, it's a little bit to get used to this because we can't basically see where we're going in the real world. And the last one is called the Venus Ladder. So I like the title, the Venus Ladder, because it's about that ladder of humanity that we work in as artists or as humans. And it goes on for 30,000 years as we know it, that we're trying to develop our humanity and humanities as well. And at the same time, in the face of atrocity and war and so on, we're still working with Venus.